3, 2, 1, click. Hi team, welcome to the Skate Podcast for Star Wars The Old Republic. Today we walk through the class updates for the 5 classes that have been posted to date. Our broadcast astromech today is EPC 200, which I guess means we've been doing this quite a while. But it's still going to be a mostly normal show, but I guess we'll talk about that a little bit. Hey astromech! With me as always is Seema. Hi Seema, how's 200 feeling to you?
Doesn't it make you feel like tired? Like, how have we done this 200 times? Amazing.
Yeah. Although it also seems like it's really just flown by. It's like,
yeah,
I guess we're up to 200.
Yeah, it really has.
and that's 200 weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah, Arv was saying we really should celebrate 208 because that would be the actual four years worth of episodes. Because in that time we did miss one week, but we've done basically 200 weeks every week, with that one exception.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see.
That's what I call consistency, man.
We'll talk about it later in the show, but we'll see what we're gonna do. Think about our 4-year anniversary and maybe some things we'll do in the next couple of weeks to prep for it. Well, let's kick it off with what you've been doing this week, Seema. What have you been up to?
I've been playing in the casino and on the pleasure barges because there's slot machines out there too. I think I've spent about 600K so far, and I only have certificates to show for it. I haven't spent any yet. I know for sure I'm going to buy the dance floor and the microphone because those are fantastic. I want those. But I'm kind of hoping for the companion, the Gamorrean companion. I know some people have gotten several of the vehicles, the speeders, which I wouldn't be unhappy if I got one of those, but I want the companion. Yeah, that's been mostly a casino, and then of course we had our ops team that you and I are on. We ran last week, but since we did our podcast on Thursday, we've already talked about that. And tonight on MFM, we went to Voss and we did Nightmare Pilgrim, which I think, was it you, had heard a rumor that you don't need the item anymore, the alpha wave inhibitor to keep you from getting killed.
Right.
That used to have that fight, so we decided to try it without it, and that's true. You don't have to have it. I think it might have helped a little bit. Like it took us a couple of tries to get it, but if we had missed that, if we hadn't gotten it on the second try, I was going to suggest maybe the tanks put it on just for a little bit less damage. But it didn't seem like it was doing a lot of damage in general. And then our group was pretty good about not standing in stuff, which was awesome. We just needed to do things like switch faster and yeah.
Yep.
But that was fun. I mean, we haven't done that in ages, and I've been wanting to, so check mark. And then we went and did the Belsavis World Boss, and then we ran low on World Bosses after that. We tried to find some other ones, but they were not up. This week, the World Boss on Tatooine comes with Conquest points, so we figured there's some other groups probably out there doing that guy. But yeah, it was a fun night. It kind of evolved into like a group chat as we went around the galaxy looking for, well, as you guys went around for the galaxy looking for stuff, I was in the casino.
Yep. Yeah, and
but you've been in the casino too, huh?
A little bit. Yeah, so we went to Nar Shaddaa because the second Conquest world boss is the one on Nar Shaddaa. And another group was killing one of them, but there are 3 maps up. We went to the other 2 and they were gone also. And we waited a half hour to just try to stand around, and we told everybody else in the group, hey, go to the casinos, and a couple of us will stand around and wait for it to respawn, and we'll summon you over. But it never resummoned. So however long the respawn is, it's at least a half hour plus however long it had been sitting there already dead. So That's okay though. We still had fun. A bunch of people were in the casino, sort of spending some cash. And yes, I've been doing that this week too. I've spent only about $750,000. I bought $1 million, $1 million. No, 1 million credits worth of smuggler tokens, and only got about 3/4 of the way through that. I've been buying them in stacks of 250, which 500,000 credits. I got through my first about 750, and I got 12 golden certificates. That's what I got out of it, which is okay. I do want the certificates because there's stuff I do want to get. I want to get the rest of the decorations, and probably the Rancor, since I never got that last time either. But that was fun.
You had certificates left over from last year, though, right? Or the last iteration, anyway.
I did. I had enough to buy 2 of the dance floors, which I put into my Nar Shaddaa stronghold, which I can show off. They only go on a rug hook, which makes it a little difficult. But I did put them on Nar Shaddaa. I wanted to give a suggestion to BioWare for that deco in particular to be able to go like on a medium floor hook at least, so you could put them in many more places. Because right now you're really limited on where you could put them. So right out there where I was on Yavin, I've got like the big starship pad that you can switch to medium floor hooks. I can't put them out there. And then I've got the patio in the back of Yavin, which I've got set up like a party patio with little campfires and little chairs and stuff that people can sit around on. But I can't put them there either because there's no rug hooks. So, but I picked up 2 of them and I put them here on my Nar Shaddaa stronghold for now. So that's fine. I just am very amused by this dance floor because I haven't collected many of the dances, and
yes,
you click on the dance floor and you'll do a random dance whether you have it unlocked or not. So that's pretty cool.
It's like a little scavenger hunt too, because you see one that's cool and you go, oh, I wonder what that one is. And you go looking for it because I like, oh, now I want to buy it so I can do that one.
Right, exactly. So we'll have to ask Appleus to come show us.
Yes.
Oh, the chat room said you need a grill. I have a grill. I do. I have a campfire and a roasting pit, and there's some sort of beast roasting on my party patio on Yavin 4. But yeah, so I did that. I did like Nightmare Pilgrim also. We did it with also 2 tanks instead of 3. It is a little bit easier with 3 because as soon as he does his enraged gore, the dog does its enraged gore, you're supposed to do a tank swap because you'll get hit with a ton of damage. So we were killing our tank relatively often. Poor Stavus.
Yeah, there's less in combat rezzing when you have 3 tanks. But then we actually developed a trick too.
Which was letting Stavus die and laughing? Is that the trick?
No, it was the first
price
person
I was
to
willing
die.
to pay.
The first person that died ran all the way back, but before they got in combat, they put a guild flagship summons out.
Yes.
So then anybody who died, including Stavus, could release, but then they could accept the guild flagship teleport and then get back to the fight quickly.
Yeah, I actually did find that on the web somewhere and had people to do it. I came clean on that. I didn't invent that, but yeah, that's a good little trick.
I thought we kind of I thought that was I thought that was pretty good.
Pioneered that. We
and it works because
ourselves.
it's an outdoor fight. So
right. So
and it works for us because everyone in our guild has the rights to do flagship summons, which is a recent change that we made or that you made. That's working out really well.
Yeah, I'm glad we opened that up to everyone. We just limited the amount of credits that could be withdrawn from the guild bank because we still do use those for things like unlocking parts of the guild ships. But it was enough that everybody's able to do at least a handful of summons per week, and that's been working out really well. But with that, I think that's all we've been doing. Let's talk about what BioWare has been doing.
Now, an Imperial News Network report.
So first up, the full release schedule, the full maintenance schedule for July isn't posted yet. Eric said that he will be posting it soon, but did give us a hint that 5.3, the next update that we're looking for, which should include the next boss fight on Iokath, will be dropping on July 11th. And that's the next boss in the Gods from the Machine operation, and it's Ivella and Esne. Is that how you would pronounce it?
That's how I pronounce it from the way they're spelled, but I guess we'll find out when they talk to each other, hopefully, or when the origin mother talks to them.
Hey, Ivella, go kill the little one. Which one's the little one? Yeah, we'll see. What else, Seema?
Also, Eric made a post about what's coming, new cartel pack updates. So the recent ones were not that well received, so they're making some changes. Each pack will now contain 5 slots instead of 4, and then each slot will have, here's what the slots look like. One slot will have a guaranteed new pack item, and they'll be of silver rarity or higher. In one slot, there'll be a cartel market item of any rarity up to platinum. Armor sets will drop as complete sets, and Grand Chance cubes can be in this slot too. And then the third slot, any cartel item of bronze or silver rarity. Armor sets will drop again as complete sets, and a Grand Chance cube can also be in this slot. And then a companion gift and a Jawa scrap. So that's the 5 items.
Sounds good. Yeah, the latest pack, when they made the changes, it feels like there's not much in there.
Right.
Even though they had some greater chance to get good stuff, it still feels like there's not much. So at least
right, because if you don't get one of the good things, then it seems like an empty crate almost. So hopefully this will feel better, feel more fun.
Yep. Also, there's a post out there from Keith who's continuing to have dialogue around what the roadmap was and some of the design changes that they made and where they're making investments for this year in developing content. And there was a couple posts out there calling him out saying, why did you divert resources? Why aren't you releasing all the op all at once and, doing some of this other stuff in between? We sort of really want that op, and now you're sort of stretching it out. That is a conscious decision on their part. It does take a long time to do boss fights. They have a lot of tuning to do. They're tuning for multiple difficulties. It's quite an involved process. And what they said, and I sort of agree with them on this, was two things. They wanted to at least get the first boss fight out and then get boss fights out throughout the rest of the year. But also, they can't just wait till all of that operation is done, even if it was going to take all summer, and never do any of the other things. I in general, with the amount of resources that they have available and the priorities that they're putting on them, I agree with it for the most part. I can see if your preferred thing isn't top of the priority list or not getting done as quickly as you'd like, it may not feel like it's optimal, but I like it.
Well, yeah, I think that's what they have to do. They can't do... Right, I think his point is right, that they can't just drop everything and complete the ops, because that would feel too two-dimensional, even to people whose top concern is operations.
Right.
And so it is a juggling thing. So that is one reason why it's good that they're involving the community more, because when they can only do so much, they got to choose very carefully, and the more data they have to make their decisions on, the better. So anyway, that was my little soapbox, but one of many. Also, Ian Ryan, who is a SWTOR writer, he is exiting for other opportunities, and there was quite a bit on Twitter about him. He tweeted that it was his last day at BioWare. He says, "I'm leaving behind a great studio and some of the best friends I've ever had, but a new adventure calls." So we don't know what that is yet, but he said he also got to work a little bit on Anthem, so he's happy for that. But maybe we'll find out eventually where he landed.
Yeah, so he was designated a lead writer and specifically was working on Kotet and Coffee. So significant resource is part of the team that is moving on. So we'll have to see how they fill that in. I guess if you're a writer and you're looking for an opportunity, might be a good time to give Charles Boyd a call. And also, you know, the usual type of things that happens every week. Hey, Harbinger crashed.
Yes.
No one really knows why, but that's what it does. So my comment was the tide goes in, the tide goes out, Harbinger crashes. You can't explain that. That's a
really,
nice
I mean,
reference.
Yeah.
Bill O'Reilly reference.
I also made a note of this one particular question that was on the forums, you know, one of many, but this one person asked, what's up with the PvP bolster? Are they ever going to raise it to match the higher gear levels that we have now? And Eric answered with this answer: we're working on getting a discussion topic together on this very thing, bolster. We want to ensure that we explain our stance on bolster, gearing, and expertise, and then see how everyone feels we should proceed. I am hopeful that will be this week's discussion topic. And the reason I'm pointing that out is I kind of like that. Basically what they're saying is we're going to explain how we think about this and, you know, get your feedback and figure out how to go forward. Instead of, in the past, I feel like they've said things like, tell us what you'd like, or tell us what you think. And it always felt kind of empty, like they didn't know what else to say, and so that was their fallback thing to say. And this feels much more like they want to engage. They're saying, here's how we look at it, and here's some of the considerations that we have when we do these things, so that when they do get feedback from the community, it's actually more meaningful because the community has a better understanding of how the process works or what the limitations are. So I don't know, I just think I just point to it, and then when I read it, I thought, you know, it's a positive change. I feel like there's change in the wind.
Yes. The winds of change, they are a-blowin'. But I like that they're asking what's up and having all of these dialogues. So this is good. Continue to provide constructive, positive discussion and feedback in a respectful way, and hopefully we'll get good things out of it. A little bit in guild and community news. So Alea Iacta Est, our guild, is part of, or was sort of originated by as a part of a larger community, which is under the Frog Pants umbrella. So Scott Johnson was one of our founders of the guild originally, back when it was just a WoW guild many, many years ago, probably like 10 years ago now. And
when it was called I Eat Babies.
I Eat Babies was the original name. They made him change it. And then Scott started a podcast, and that grew into a business where Scott has a podcast network now, and that's what he does full time, in addition to a little bit of his comic art still. And that podcast network grew to the point where they were able to do sort of like a mini convention. You know, it's really only a few hundred people, maybe 400 people that go and they've sort of capped it at that size, or maybe 300, 400. And every year for the past maybe 6 or 7 years, except for last year, which they didn't have it, they do this little mini convention called Nerdtacular. Anyway, long story short, Nerdtacular is this weekend. So I will be heading out to Salt Lake City, up in the mountains at the Snowbird Resort on Thursday through Sunday, and hanging out for the Friday, Saturday Nerdtacular event, and meeting up with a bunch of friends. And one of the things that I love to do up there at Snowbird is run in the mountains. So I'll be doing running every day up in the mountains and hills, which is really cool. The last 2 times that I ran up in Snowbird was 2015 and 2014, and both times we saw moose while we were out running, just out on the trails up in the mountains there, not too far away from the resort. So that was awesome.
When you say we, was there actually anybody running with you?
Yeah, usually only one other person. His name's Velastres is his Twitter tag, his gamer tag, but he actually has a little podcast, not so little, pretty cool podcast about board games,
nice.
Board games and beer. I have to double check it, make sure he's still doing it, but But he, both of those last 2 years, has run with me almost every day. So he and I go out and run at least. I try to make it a big thing, the running part. I put the note out everywhere and say, hey, let's do, the run club. Everybody come run. And I put a cooler out with water and Cliff Bars. But yeah, usually it's only me and him. Every once in a while, one or two other people. But yeah, so if you are going to be at Nerdtacular, come check it out. 7:45 a.m. every morning. I'll be out there running too, so you can find me under the bridge at 7:45 a.m. At
I know what it is though. It's people have these good intentions and then they get up there and they realize, oh, it's like high altitude up here.
Yeah, and they stay up. And I do too. They stay up. Yeah, it's high altitude, and you stay up until like midnight, 1 in the morning, playing board games. And there's like a lot of D&D and card games and Cards Against Humanity, and maybe some beer and whiskey. And
possibly
and then
some beer and
trying to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go for a run. Yeah, that's a good challenge, but I still do it. So come join. Anyway, that's our guild stuff for the week. No MFN next week, right, Seema?
That's right, because we're taking a break for 4th of July, Independence Day in the U.S.
Excellent.
I mean, the break is affecting everyone, but the holidays in the U.S. are something, however, something dark side.
Yeah, so U.S. holiday. Remember, they don't have July 4th in Canada. It just goes from the 3rd to the 5th. So, but yeah, we'll take that day off from MFN formally. So the full MFN will be off, but I may be around hanging out, so you can jump in for that. And I see we're on the Conquest board already this week. Is it just normal Conquest stuff? What do we got going on for that?
Well, I mean, we're probably on the board because of having done Nightmare Pilgrim. Or wait, did that count for something we did counted tonight as a group in MFN?
Trapjaw did, yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right, because we did do Trapjaw, and it took longer to kill Trapjaw the way Planet Sinking is than it took us to kill the one on Belsavis, which was interesting. But yes, Conquest this week is the Deathmark one. The notable thing about this is there's some extra PvP stuff. So if you are into PvP, check out the Conquest panel in the game, because there's some stuff in there like, kill 100 players and stuff that are not normally there. The repeatable stuff is very, very normal. It's the group finder stuff, the weekly missions for flashpoints and uprisings, and then the war zones and GSF.
And as always, if you are not in AIE and you like the sound of these fun things that we do, like the meetups and the MFN and all that kind of thing, you can certainly join. And it's pretty easy. Just jump on Jedi Covenant and do a /cjoin AIE LFO, and you can find us that way. Most of the time, if we happen to be in that faction, we're on both factions on Jedi Covenant. You can also look up guild info on aie-guild.org on all the guild, the major guild and all the games that we're in. And you can find the Discord information there and jump on Discord, or you can tweet at us at MaxGray and at AIESEMA, and we'll get you connected up that way too. We would love to have you in there. Also, big thumbs up and thanks to the chat room for helping us out, getting the show ready and chatting with us after. I always appreciate that. I think I've got everyone's pack drawing giveaway all up to date. We do a little drawing at the end of the show for just a single cartel pack, but a little something. But I'm usually late in getting those unlocked and off to people. So hopefully everybody's got those, and I will talk to all you after the show. But right now we want to talk about the meta and what's up with the classes.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
All right, I'll give it a try.
I'm ready to give it a try. Shut up, Luke. No, there is no whining. Do or do not. There is no whine. So what's up? We have class changes. We talked about this a little bit last week. We are going to talk at the Y. So I told Seema in the pre-show. We'll kick it off by talking about the how and the why. And she said, the how at the why? When were we at the why? No, not at the why. I now need to make my little character here do the YMCA dance, and it would fit
I don't
perfectly.
remember going to the why. When were we at the why?
So we're going to talk about the how and the why of, well, we did that a whole bunch last week. So we're going to just,
yes.
We're going to sum up. No, that will take too long. Let me sum up. We are going to talk about each of the 5 classes that they've already announced. And just to recap what we talked about last week, they've categorized each of the classes and the specs into different categories. There's tanks and there's healers. And then across DPS, there's sort of 5 categories of DPS, which is mostly melee versus ranged, but it's melee versus quasi-melee burst. So melee sustained versus quasi-melee burst versus melee burst range sustained versus ranged quasi-sustained versus ranged burst. And across that whole spectrum, there should be, their thinking, their argument is there should be a 10% gap in capability in DPS output across that spectrum, where melee sustained has the biggest challenge because you got to be running around and right up in the boss's faces and chasing after players in PvP. So they're on the plus 5% side. And ranged burst, having big burst and being able to switch targets very easily and being able to, you know, sort of relax and, you know, make sandwiches while you're out at range and going through your rotation, they're on the negative 5% side. So across that spectrum, what they did is they said, we're going to look at the classes that seem to be most out of that range where they're supposed to be in and make some adjustments to start, and then do more classes as it goes. So you can go back to that show if you want to hear more of the details of us sort of arguing about the pros and cons of how they're going about that, what classes they pick first, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. But we have 5 of them now that have specific examples that they've outlined for us, and 2 of them are buffs and 3 of them are relatively significant nerfs. So that's what we're going to dig into right now. So what's your sum up and from last week, Seema? Any sort of intro thoughts that you wanted to throw back out there and remind people about?
Well, just I think the biggest thing is the thing that you were mentioning at the end of the show is like when they start off with nerfs, it's hard to recover. Like if someone wants to change classes because they don't like nerfs to their class, where do they go when there's no class to receive them because the buffs haven't been in place yet? So that was really my takeaway from that.
Right, because I would like, so if my Merc gets nerfed to the ground, which it seems like it will be, I wouldn't mind going and playing my Sork, but Sorks aren't very high on the on the DPS right now either. They're one of those classes that could really use a buff, and everybody has sort of got Sorks on the bottom of their list in a lot of scenarios, especially like lightning Sorks. So now I'm sort of like scrambling to try to figure out if some of my favorite classes are either nerfed or bad, and they haven't buffed the ones that are bad yet. What am I going to do? So there's that, and then the other thing which we talked about, which I think we'll see as we go through these, is how many levers are they pulling, and what is that going to do to the class? I feel like in some of these cases they're pulling a whole lot of levers. They're making a whole bunch of changes, especially on the nerf side, and I'm wondering if that's going to cause us more pain and heartache when everything sort of shakes out, than if they had just made some small tweaks and then tweaked a little bit more if they had to. So let's start with number 1, the first one that they announced, which was the Hatred Assassin Serenity Shadow. Not the Assassin Shadow, as you were saying, Seema, which is...
Yeah, right. There's no such thing as a Shadow Assassin.
A Shadow Assassin. Although that is very cool.
Super cool.
Yeah,
yes.
I want to play a Shadow Assassin. So the Hatred Assassin Serenity Shadow, remember, so these are mirror versions of the same class. One on the Republic, one on the Empire. what they did with this is a little bit of a buff. So this is in the category of sustained melee. So they felt like it wasn't putting up the amount of output that it needed to. So they said, fine, we'll give it a little bit of a buff. The way they're buffing it is this has a little bit more of a reliance on dots. Those dots are getting buffed up a little bit. That's where you get sort of the sustained damage. It's not burst with direct damage. When you're sort of laying out the dots, that's where you're sort of getting the sustained damage. This seems reasonable. I think in general, people are going to find that they are getting buffed. I don't know how much these buffs are. It is a relatively good list, though. It's across, what, 5 different abilities? It looks like 4 damage abilities are getting buffed. No, 3 damage abilities are getting buffed. And 2 other abilities are giving a little bit of other benefits, like Force Restore and Healing. The Leeching Hunger also restores a little bit more force. So a little bit more on the resources, a little bit more on the damage from some of the dots. So we'll see.
So here's one of the, I mean, it's tricky in my mind, to tune these DPS specs for essentially quote unquote tank class, because it's such a different story that character's telling. It's like, what's it supposed to be good at, and how is it supposed to be different from a Jedi Knight or a Sith Warrior that has DPS specs as well? So how do you make it feel different but still be good? It's interesting path to walk, I think. And one of the things they said in their post is that they would like for Hatred Serenity to shine at what it's supposed to be known for, which is high sustained melee damage, which I don't know that people think of it as high, that it is known for that, but that tells us that's what their goal is for that class, which I love that they're telling us that stuff.
Right. So at least they're being very detailed on what the objective is, how they're tuning it, and what the direction they're going. Everyone can chime in again on those threads and provide some of that feedback on where you think it's going, especially since they've been so detailed on what they're providing. So that's nice. A thing I've also kept an eye on in each of these, just a little bit, I haven't gone into too much detail on this one, for example, is I'm trying to get a sense of what the community is thinking so far and what some of the feedback is. I think, in general, people are relatively okay with what they're seeing so far on this. In each of these cases, we do have some of the quote-unquote theory crafters doing a little bit of calculation. I don't think anyone is saying that this is really going to make Shadow Assassins overpowered. But everyone, I do see multiple times in these threads where people are also asking about the utilities. A lot of the utilities are providing extra abilities for things like survivability and the ability to move around more quickly. And they specifically said utilities are off the table at the moment. They're just focusing on these damage ranges, and they're trying to get that straightened out first. Okay, so fine. So that's where they're at with Hatred Assassin and Serenity Shadow. That idea of the abilities, though, plays in quite a bit when you think about the next class that they gave us details on, which is Arsenal Merc and Gunnery Commando. So Merc Commando, Arsenal in particular, so not Innovative Ordnance, but this is Arsenal, the burst spec. So their rationale, again, remember, this is ranged burst. This should be on the weakest output for a standard parse against a dummy. This should be at the lowest end of the range. And it was at the relatively high end of the range as it stood right now. And as a result, they are nerfing it. They are nerfing it with a bunch of nerfs, and now there's 5 levers that they're changing, and I, as a mercenary, am a little, we do expect that this is going to go down. It's relatively reasonable that it would come down some, I guess. But again, if this is going to really make it much more difficult for me to do much in PvP or really seem really weak. It may just not feel good to play. So I may not want to play my Merc as much. Doing a little less damage, that's fine. Changing a whole bunch of these abilities all at once and having them multiply against each other instead of just be additive, that'll really hurt, and maybe that'll be much, much worse than it seems. The key piece of community feedback that I even saw come up in the Hatred Assassin Serenity Shadow thread that's about Mercs is, hey, nerfing their DPS, that's all fine. That's not what we wanted, though, for you to be adjusting on Mercs Commandos right now. Everybody's big complaint on Mercs Commandos, especially from the PvP perspective, is that people think their survivability is way too high. Again, I think that's just a little bit more of a perception, but that's a utility problem. So that's off the table at the moment. So their damage is going to come down some for Commandos and Mercs, but they're not going to get those utilities changed. So I don't know if it's going to feel like what people want it to feel like right now in PvE or PvP with what you would want them coming out of the Mercs and Commandos. So what's your view on the Merc Commando? I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week too, but how are you feeling about the Merc Commando stuff?
Well, I think that I go back and forth, right? Because I do agree with you that when you move a lot of levers, it's hard to know the effect of moving any one of them. So to not touch the utilities is a way of not moving as many levers, but at the same time, they have such a big effect on some things. So I kind of have this wait and see because it is pretty complex, and the way they're approaching it is a pretty complex method. So I think the only way to get the numbers and the data is for people to actually go out and kill things with the new changes in place.
I guess that seems to be what they're saying is the only way, which I'd be somewhat surprised about, but I guess that seems to be the only way, because I would have thought that you could do a little bit of this with math. We've got we've got parsers and theory crafters that seem to be able to do quite a bit of it with math, and I would imagine BioWare would be able to do that too. But if that's the case, then why did these classes ever get released without that math putting them in the right spot?
They clearly are applying math, right? I mean, because they're reducing something by 4.89%. They came up with that number using math.
Right.
It's not 5%. It's not 4%. It's 4.89%.
Right.
So
I hope that's math, and it's not just eyeballing it.
And I mean, I don't know how sophisticated they are about their modeling, but I assume they're doing some modeling. But even sophisticated models can't completely predict what people are going to do. So, I mean, and actually having people do it has got to be the best modeling.
Yes. So, yes, I get that you need to get it out there to see how it plays, but that's also the interplay between classes playing against each other and classes in combination with their utilities and all of that kind of thing. And since that's not really what they're thinking about right now, it seems like more this either should have been done way back at the beginning or could have been done quite a bit sooner as well. Even just small tweaks. Just make a couple of the small tweaks along the way, and then you wouldn't have to do these bigger, a whole bunch of changes all at once. And you could have sort of seen it play out. So that is Arsenal Merc Gunnery Commando. I may be having to be switched to Innovative Ordnance, which I've played in the past. It's just a slower ramp-up time, and it's much more painful on a lot of these fights where you need to be switching targets quite often. And that does hit PvP and PvE on fights with a lot of adds. You think the Tithe fight, where you've got the adds coming out each round and a bunch of adds all over the place. Switching targets on a slow build spec, like a dot spec in particular, it gets really annoying. So hopefully it's not going to be crazy low, crazy bad, and when I need it, I can still use Arsenal. But if not, I have to stick with Innovative Ordnance. I might not do all that much more PvP on my Merc and switch to another class that I'm more comfortable with that kind of build doing PvP on, like Madness Sork, especially if it gets a little bit of a buff. We did get a buff outlined for PowerTech Vanguard.
Right.
And this is the Pyrotech PowerTech and the Plasmatech Vanguard. This certainly has been a problem that people have been talking about since 4.0, 5.0. PowerTech and PowerTech and Vanguard are melee classes for DPS, remember. So they have to get up in your face. They have to get close to the boss. They're taking a little bit of extra damage. And again, this is another place where people are more worried about some of the secondary effects, like the survivability of the class, than the damage. But the damage was still certainly called out. So a buff is warranted. I'm happy to get a little of a buff. I remember back in the day when my Vanguard back around launch, or into 1.5 or what some of those early patches were, Vanguard was a pretty kick-ass class, and it was sort of at the top of the damage range there for a while. There was a spec, there was a hybrid spec called Carolina. Yeah. It was nicknamed Carolina Parakeet.
Now you're really going back in time.
Yeah. Carolina Parakeet, those were the good days. Those were the good old days of my Vanguard in PvP. My Vanguard is, I think it's Valor rank 90 or something like that. I did a lot of PvP on my Vanguard back in the day, and it would work. And nowadays, Vanguards and PowerTechs don't work all that well in PvP. I have PvP'd some on my Vanguard lately, but I've stayed in tank spec, actually, and just played it as a tank and used the defensives and tried to keep the healer alive and make that my job and interrupt and do crowd control and those kinds of things, not relying on my damage very much. So what do you think
I
of
have a question.
This? You gonna DPS on your PowerTech?
Yeah. So on this one, and this is another one, like I made the comment about the Shadow Assassins. It's the off spec of a tank. It's the DPS spec. I shouldn't say off spec. It's the DPS spec of a class that also can play tank. And in this one, though, they don't really say. So I'll just ask you because maybe you know. Is this melee sustained or melee burst? Like when they say we're bringing you up to your targets, do you look? Is this class going to be melee?
Plasmatech, Pyrotech, I believe, are melee sustained.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. So they didn't really say in this particular one, but I think in terms of melee, the really bursty, I think of like the Sentinel Marauder.
Yeah.
Melee.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a dot and burn is how this class works. So I think that would certainly put it in the melee sustained. I believe I had a note from last week that I could confirm while we're talking, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it puts it in the melee sustained range. I don't think I kept the note of all of the classes and where they fell, but you could look it up. But I'm pretty sure this is one of those melee sustained.
Well, it makes sense.
So it should be at the high end then. It should have a little bit of a bonus because you do need to be sitting there in the face of your opponents or in the face of the boss. You do need time to ramp up. Any of those sort of sustained damage classes are annoying when you got to switch back and forth between trash. So good. Give it a buff.
I mean,
we'll see.
And not
how
only
much
that,
of a buff.
I mean, people maybe don't realize that those classes, they have to pay more attention to their health too than ranged classes in general.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I just know from healing that the melee, yes, they have to run back and forth for targets, but they also have to do a lot of running to get out of stuff.
They do.
Range just doesn't have to do. I mean, range has to stay out of stuff, but it's different. It's night and day different.
It is. It gets really annoying on fights like the Eyeless. So if you think of the Eyeless, which is the Rakghoul boss, he gets that big giant purple circle around him where the range can just keep pummeling and pummeling and pummeling, and then all the little ads come out and the range can just, drop the 30 yards away, drop a blazing bolt, or drop the sweeping blasters or whatever, and mow a bunch of them down. And you get those melee classes that are, now I got to run out of this circle and stop doing damage. Now I got to run across the map, or maybe I can use a gap closer to get out to some of the ads and stop doing damage in between. And now I got to get back to the boss, and again, another global cooldown where I'm not doing damage. So they do need that opportunity. One of the things, though, with a lot of these melee classes, though, like when you think about PvP, they've been given a lot of tools to keep them in the fight and to reduce the mobility of their opponents. So, like me as a merc again, or a sork, if I'm playing against a really good marauder who's using a sustained or a bursty type of spec for marauder, their ability to do multiple leaps and gap closing and do roots and slows on me as an opponent does really limit my ability to stay away from them. So I feel like a lot of that's been mitigated. So the fact that they get all of that utility plus a damage bonus now is sort of really makes them seem quite powerful.
Right, and your survivability is going down because you won't be doing as much damage.
Exactly. So we will see how that one goes. Next one is near and dear to your heart, I know. Why don't you talk through what you've seen there?
Well, I mean, the others we'll just have to see how they go, and I can be objective or anything, but this one's just crazy. I mean, they basically raise the cost of everything and reduce the healing of everything. It seems like it's, taking a hammer to change a light bulb or something. It's just,
yeah,
I don't think that this is going to work.
So this is Sorks and Consular healers. Look at this list of levers that they're pulling, and it's like, yeah, this one gonna be down by 10 to 15%, and here's another 10%, and now we're gonna increase the force costs on a bunch of things, and what is this? It's like 3, 6, 9, about 12 different levers that they're pulling. Yikes.
And not only that, the thing that makes me nervous about that is, even if I saw a DPS class with this long list, I would still have a feeling of, well, maybe they know what they're doing, right? But if they're working to an HPS number that's their target, that's not the way to tune a healing class. I mean, I don't know what the way is, but how much healing you can put out per second is only a small part of what healers actually doing. So I don't know. I hope this nerf to sages and seers is not going to be as devastating as I think it's going to be.
Right. I hope not as well, but yeah, with all of this stuff in here, I really think this looks dramatic. So we shall see.
I mean, if they would have said, because we feel like these should be support healers and they should have more utility and that's how we see their role, then I would maybe give it more, I would at least feel like they had a goal for the class, but this just feels like we did a spreadsheet and here's how it came out.
Yeah. And again, if that was the case, why couldn't they make a smaller number of these tweaks sooner if they were just going to, do this math and just run a bunch of numbers off and say done?
I mean, the one thing they did say, two things they said. They wanted it so that force management was not trivial, so that you had to actually do it. And then they also wanted it so that roaming mend and wandering mend, it was not efficient force-wise to use them as a single target heal, which I assume that they, have data that tells them that healers were doing that. I don't know because I haven't played my Sork in a long time, but yeah.
Yeah.
So they did. I don't want to say they said nothing, but yeah, those are goals, but they're still based on heal per second.
Right. Right. Yes, but that does go a little bit beyond with the force management and all of that kind of thing for one. Because that sounds like we want you to care about force management is not just adjusting heals per second. Then that's also saying we want your rotation to be more complicated, whether or not it affects your heals per second. The second thing is, yeah, that's again reasonable that you wouldn't want those to be used as a single target, but you know, are you really? Is that again changing heals per second, or you did something wrong when you set up that ability originally that you're trying to correct, again, independent of heals per second?
Right. And I mean, it is true. I think that I don't think anyone who plays Sage or Sork right now would argue that force management is hard. It's not. I mean, it's very easy to do. But what I was going to say is my heat management on my Merc is very easy to do too. So it's sort of like all you have to do is pay attention. It's not a big giant balancing act. So maybe that's what they have in view for Merc healing too.
Maybe. So we'll see. And then the last of the initial 5 that we've gotten details on so far is another nerf. So this is Virulence Sniper and Dirty Fighting Gunslinger. So this is the quasi, I think this is sort of in between not burst but not totally sustained is where this one falls. And I think, so this is definitely a nerf. People don't seem to be crying too much about the nerf, but are saying significantly in here. So I don't play either of these, so I can't get too much of a sense of it. But they're saying, yeah, this is a nerf. It is going to be relatively significant. And I did see a lot of the discussion in this thread where people are saying, I'm going back to Marks, which is usually what I play when I do play my sniper. So if people are saying that bummer, this makes this spec drop off the list and I'm going to have to play marksman if I want to use it in PvE, then maybe it is too much. I think this was another one where we saw a few people in the Theorycraft class saying, yeah, here's someone. Quick comparison on parses. I would expect this to be 800 to 850 DPS damage per second loss. I think I've got the math right, but I'd recommend other top snipers do the same on the math. So that's, and another person here saying 875 DPS according to my spreadsheet, again, based on formulas and math. So we'll see where that goes and what people do. But again, if it's another one where it makes the class feel bad and you either go to a different spec or you're looking for something else to play, starting off, I would have done all of the buffs first and then gotten to the nerfs. Because why not? Why not bring up the other classes? You would have potentially even spread out people from that may have been playing these classes before and were avoiding those other classes because they were at the bottom of the list. You could have had people spreading out. One other big problem I really have been thinking about in terms of this whole idea of this far into, sort of where we're at with the state of these classes and where we're at with where 4.0 and 5.0 have gone and Galactic Command have gone is, say this did really upset me. It felt really crazy. I don't want to play my Merc anymore. I'm going to go play my Power Tech or my Sork. I'm not at 300 on either of those. And I've slowly been bringing my Vanguard up, and now it's at like 150 or 160. That's a long road to 300 to have it to be doing on an alt. And now if people right now are expecting that they're going to switch and have to be back in tier 1 command crates, I know there's other ways to get gear now, but that's just going to feel bad especially if you go do the work to get the gear the other ways, and you're getting say tier 3, tier 4 gear in most of your slots, and then you're going to spend the next couple months still getting tier 1 crates on this character that you're switching to because you felt bad on your other character. that's going to feel terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if Merc healing gets a nerf like this, I'm going to stay a Merc healer, and you guys can just die more.
Right, right. And the way we play in casual, it's not as much of an
Yeah.
issue. So it won't affect us that much because we're a little slightly more casual. We're going to play what we want to play. This brings me to the last point that I just wanted to touch on, which is the meta, right?
All right.
So why don't you define the meta a little bit? Even talk about where you sort of use the meta even more than in
So,
SWTOR.
so when we talk about the meta, it's like the game outside of the game. So in this case, if you're looking at the game being like PvP, the meta is like what classes and what specs do people choose to play PvP? Sort of like if you look out and in your meta it's all mercs, then how do you combat that? That's the meta. That's the meta. So it's a game within a game or the game outside of the game. So that you're saying, okay, if I want to, if I think that the team I'm going to play about is going to have this composition, what do I want my team's composition to be?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you say where I use it, you're referring to pet battling, which is what I do in World of Warcraft. We talk about the meta all the time in pet battling, and what that means is we're coming off of a long period where the meta was all full of AoE and undead pets. And a lot of the most interesting conversations were all about how do you combat those two strong things, undead pets, which had a racial that made them OP, and AoE, which was the way it was computed, made it very OP. So,
Yeah.
that's the meta.
So and that also affects So it definitely affects PvP, and even things like, hey, I'm setting up a ranked team, or I have a ranked team. I need a Sork healer. That's potentially going to be changing right now. So maybe it's not going to be Sork healers anymore, and you're going to be asking or requiring people, if you're going to be a healer for my team, we're not taking Sork healers anymore. Stuff like that's going to start happening.
Mm-hmm.
In
Right.
PvE, you have the potential for the same sorts of changes around the meta, especially for nightmare progression groups. So those kinds of
Right.
groups are going to be asking these same sorts of questions and saying, not only, now mercs have dropped to the bottom of the list and their burst isn't even all that useful anymore. I know, Max, you've been playing, your Arsenal merc for a while. You either switch to IO, and even that's not that great right now, or you're gonna have to switch to the assassin because that's top of the list, or we're gonna kick you off the nightmare team.
Right. And oh, by the way, can you get up to tier 4 by next week's operations?
Right. Is if you're gonna switch, and if not, we're gonna pick
Right.
somebody else up. So that's this idea of the meta, and the meta, especially around ranked PvP and nightmare teams. What the construct of what classes are going to be preferred and how you react to those classes in the game. That's a concern. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
So I see people in chat saying, well, maybe I'll switch to this or maybe I'll switch to that. I mean, it's premature because there's always going to be, that person who plays this underrated class really well and they're topping the charts everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even if you stay with your class that got nerfed, if it's your beloved class and you play it well compared to how well you would play the other class, you're hopefully you would still have higher performance, higher measurable performance than you would if you switch. So, I hope we're not inspiring people to go out and switch.
Right. Right. There is an element of skill and muscle memory and the ability to know your abilities to the point where you know when to move, you know when to stick in place, how often you can get an extra little bit of damage off before you have to move out of a circle. So yeah, don't just quit because your class is getting nerfed, or switch to a different class right away. And also, really, unless you're at the highest levels of play, as we're saying, ranked PvP, and you're very competitive, or nightmare progression and you're very competitive, a lot of this, hopefully, they won't be breaking things terribly and it'll be fine to play whatever you like. Still interesting discussion, and that's why we're having it. It's interesting to watch, and we'll have to see where it goes. It may feel more impactful than it really is. Maybe I'll just stick with my Merc, and maybe I'll just stick with Arsenal and just eat the nerf that I'm getting, and it'll all be fine. But you know, this is the kind of discussion we have when this thing kind of happens in any game. So there you go.
I mean, in the end, I mean, we're reading this and we're bringing our own expertise to these lists of nerfs and buffs, and we're interpreting what the outcome from these changes will be. But we could be wrong, and maybe the dev who's making these changes is right. So that's a possibility.
No, that's not possible. We are always right. What would developers know about their own game?
Yes, exactly.
One final thing before we wrap up. We mentioned we're at 200 episodes, and we mentioned that we're thinking about either in the next couple weeks or as we approach, say in the next, by the end of summer, as we approach the 4-year mark, we were thinking it'd be fun to gather up a bunch of questions. Almost an Ask Me Anything style gathering of questions. So I'll write this up on Twitter and in another couple other places as well. But if anyone has questions out there that they want to throw at us, we're going to start collecting them at least over the next couple of weeks and do a show on them. Maybe sooner than our 4-year, or maybe for the 4-year. Feel free to ask us anything. If it's things where we think we need to get an answer from BioWare, we will potentially go off and do that. I'll pick up my bat phone and call up Keith and Eric and Charles, who are holding their breath waiting for my call nightly.
Yes, they are.
We'll try to get answers there.
We joke, but I expect them to be responsive, because that's I think that's how they're being.
That's the new community meta.
Yeah, the community meta, right.
Also, feel free to ask us questions. I won't promise to answer every single question, but I'll try real hard. So ask me anything. Ask me what my favorite pizza in Chicago is. Ask me why I play a mercenary and a vanguard and why they're all named Max. Figure out a bunch of questions, and we'll see what we can do to answer them. So with that, our EPC 200 droid here is ready to blast off and head out and get ready for his many years of floating around in the galaxy. As long as we've been doing these podcasts, I guess we've had Astromex out there for almost 4 years now, still floating around. Thanks to all of you for joining us on newoverlords.com, iTunes, YouTube, or live on Twitch. We will stream again next Thursday night on twitch.tv/newoverlords around 10:30 p.m. Central. Please subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitter @MaxTheGray and @AIESEMA. And certainly, and most importantly, come find us on Jedi Covenant and ask us for an AIE Guild invite, because we would love to have you. And if you're going to Nerdtacular, I will see you in 2 days. And we will talk to you soon.
Later, everyone.